Michigan beat Maryland, but not by the margin the odds makers thought, 31-24. Remember Thursday's show, maybe Tuesday's show? I sat here and I asked, is Michigan immune to a lot of the struggles that a normal mortal team would face? It turns out they weren't. They got pushed yesterday, really pushed. In fact, defense and special teams had to bail them out or they may lose this game, which is how a football game works, by the way. They were on a back-to-back road stretch. They were coming off their second toughest game of the year, their first toughest game, and their big rival is on deck. They're going to Maryland, noon kickoff, Harbaugh suspended, all the talk about the program's off the field. That's just a classic spot to get tripped up. So it wasn't shocking to me that they struggled, and they got out to a big lead, so it may have been a little shocking to me that Maryland got back in it. But special teams and defense had to do it yesterday, which leads to some questions about the quarterback position at Michigan. More on that in a second. They had a fumble return for a touchdown. They had two safeties. One of them was on a blocked punt. They won the turnover battle 3-1. They had 4 sacks. They had 6 tackles for loss. Full Pate State material performance by Jesse Minter and his defense. But J.J. McCarthy, all week, get ready, you're going to hear it, and deservedly so. He's had 3 straight games now without a passing touchdown. Didn't need to do it against Penn State. And I came out of that game and I told you, I said, there's a trap setting up. People are going to think just because McCarthy threw the ball 8 times total against Penn State and they ran it the final 30-some-odd plays of the game, that he's incapable of throwing. And I said, no, don't be fooled. They just called the game the way that they needed to call that game. Well, yesterday, he throws a terrible pick down in the goal, in the end zone, I think, the pick was thrown, and could not take the game over at any point with his arm. He got under pressure fairly consistently. I was listening, because I was driving to Corvallis, I was listening to the Michigan radio call for a little bit. And look, those guys, I'll credit them, they were pretty brutally honest about some of the issues that this team has faced. It's not an invincible unit. No team is. You're just made to look that way sometimes. Southern Cal looked that way kind of earlier in the year. Now, unlike Southern Cal, Michigan plays complementary football, so Michigan's an elite team. But they can bleed, and Michigan bled yesterday. Now, you can look at that one of 2 ways. You can either say they bled, they're vulnerable, or you can look at it and say they bled, good. Once you taste that, you're about to get the best performance out of that team you'll get all year. That's what Saturday's for. That's what God has invented rivalry week for, and we got it. Ohio State coming to town. Can you imagine how big 4 quarters is here? Both teams now, but I'm talking about Michigan. On one hand, you could beat Ohio State, so you make it 3 straight. You just beat Ryan Day without your head coach. You're going to the Big Ten championship game, a game you will win. You're going to go to the college football playoff. You may be the 1 seed. At worst, you would be the 2 seed. And all's well. Or you lose. And you lost the game. Ohio State has reemerged. They've reestablished themselves, and they're going to the Big Ten title game, and they're probably going to the playoff. You're done. Unless some other upsets happen, you're done. You don't have the strength of schedule. Everything about you going to the postseason has been predicated on they need to go beat Penn State, check, and they need to beat Ohio State and win the Big Ten. Check and TBD. But if you don't fill that second box with a check mark, doesn't really matter in the eyes of the committee. And then you add in the whole, will they punish us for Harbaugh? Well, the moment you have a loss, absolutely they will. They're not putting you in there. It probably doesn't matter how the dominoes fall behind you. They're not putting you in there. That's 4 quarters. That's what 4 quarters means. Steve Winwood once saying, don't you know what the night can do? Don't you know what 4 quarters can do? That is that's a reference my 40 and over crowd is going to really love. I listened to a lot of 80s FM radio growing up. Still do. Love it. Wasn't necessarily around when it was recorded, but love it anyway.